Why do you even need spirituality? Why are you here, watching this video, seeking answers, looking inward? If your life is perfectly fine, if you're not suffering, then perhaps spirituality is not for you. If you are content being who you are, doing what you do, moving through the world with clarity and peace, then honestly, there is no need to speak of transformation, truth, or awakening. Because transformation is not a fashion. It's not a self-help upgrade. It's a response to something deep, burning, and unresolved. Spirituality, in Eastern Vedanta, Buddhist philosophy, and Christian mysticism, is a response to suffering. Not surface-level discomfort, but existential suffering. If you are not suffering, if you have not felt the wound of being, the discontent of repeating inherited lives, then spirituality may feel unnecessary to you, and that's okay. But for those who are suffering, this inquiry becomes urgent. When you look closely, you'll see that much of our suffering arises not from the world, but from within, from the automatic, inherited, compulsive tendencies that guide our decisions without our awareness. In Sanskrit, these are called vrittis or kamanas. In English, we may call them psychological tendencies, patterns we fall into again and again. These tendencies pull us down toward the average, toward unconscious living, toward repetition. And when we follow them blindly, a feedback loop of suffering begins. And once you start seeing the loop, perhaps now, spirituality becomes meaningful for you. For those who, like Nietzsche, have seen through the hollowness of cultural, religious, and moral facades. For those who, like Heidegger, have tasted the void, transformation means channeling the suffering. Therefore, it is utterly delusional to keep repeating spiritual practices while pretending they are medicine for your wound. How do you know that you know? Not just believe, not just think, but know. This isn't a casual question. This is not about memorizing a quote or believing in a teaching. This question strikes at the core of our existence. Because if you don't truly know what is true, how can you ever trust your transformation? How do you know that the shift you feel inside is real, not just another illusion of the mind? Is what you call awakening simply a mood? A psychological high? A spiritual costume? Or has something fundamental in you changed? And if there is such a thing as transformation, how do you know when it has happened? There is something dangerous about the word knowing. Because the moment you say I know, the mind often closes. It settles. It stops questioning. It stops observing. And in that settling, you might be locking yourself in yet another cage, polished, decorated, and spiritualized, but a cage nevertheless. So the question we must ask is this: how do you know that what you call truth is not just another illusion, refined, elegant, but false? And that brings us to another key point, the obsession with how. The moment you ask how to transform, how to become free, you have already entered the domain of the process. And this is where danger hides in plain sight. Because a process can either liberate you or deceive you. Yes, there are people who have transcended themselves through meditative processes, deep inquiry, or devotion. But there are many more who became trapped in the process, addicted to it, distracted by it, identified with it. We must understand this clearly. The recognition of truth is not a function of time. No one can say, do this for 21 days and you'll be free. Truth does not obey schedules. Ego does not dissolve by appointment. You may sit in meditation for hours, read ancient texts, practice breathing, chant mantras, but the moment you reduce transformation to a linear method, you may begin to chase an illusion. Because transformation is not about business and benefit. It is about unraveling yourself. Knowing your true nature, therefore the honesty of your approach is true requisite for actual perception or knowing. a curiosity interested in understanding oneself, not for any improvement or gain. This means watching your own mind without bias, without motive, without time. In this observation, you begin to see how your thoughts are not yours, how your emotions are inherited, how your actions are mostly automatic. You begin to see the programming, and that seeing, raw, unfiltered, wordless, is the first light of transformation. In ordinary life, to know something means to add something to memory. The ego, the psychological self, learns a fact, stores it and grows. The knower becomes more knowledgeable. But this kind of knowing will never free you. Because the knower, the one who seeks, the one who wants to know, is itself the problem. You can decorate it with scriptures. You can polish it with philosophy. You can educate it with wisdom traditions. But the ego that wants to know for its own glorification will never dissolve. It will only mutate. From an ordinary ego to a spiritual ego. The purpose of spirituality is not to polish the ego. It is to expose it and to see through it. So, the real knowing we are talking about here is not the accumulation of knowledge. It is the ending of the false knower. Because the knower, at its root, is motivated. It wants to protect itself. It wants to gain some benefit. It wants to appear wise. And yet beneath all its desire for truth is a secret fear that it will have to disappear. So it performs a trick. It pretends to seek truth while secretly avoiding it. This is not a small problem. This is a psychic trick so ancient, so subtle, that most people live and die within its spell. They want to know, but they don't want to change. They want truth, but not at the cost of the self. They seek spirituality, but only as long as the ego remains intact. But here's the harsh truth. If the center is false, then everything that arises from it, every act, every thought, every seeking, is false. Is there still a knower inside you? A seeker driven by motive? A self that wants to become something more? And the answer lies in a single, honest question. Has your transformation truly reduced your suffering? If not, then the ego is on disguise. You are simply shifting from being person X to person Y, more spiritual, more refined, more decorated, but still imprisoned in ego. And that is not transformation. That is just another mask. We must be careful here, because when we use the word know, most people hear it in the ordinary sense. The observer sees something, stores it as a memory, and then uses that memory to act in the future. But that is not the knowing we are speaking of. This is not about turning truth into a concept, into a technique, into a memory. You cannot domesticate the divine. You cannot convert the sacred into data. You cannot hold truth like a possession in your hand. The moment you turn insight into memory, into something to be recalled and used, it becomes dead. It becomes an image, separate from you. And once again, the ego begins using that image to project itself into the future. So the issue here is not to add anything new. It is, as we've said before, to subtract, to peel away the false layers, to abnegate the self, to dissolve the puppet that hides in the shadows and mimics life. The real question is not, how do I know? The real question is there still somebody inside me who wants to know? Am I still operating from a center that believes it is separate, real, important? Am I still being moved by unconscious programs implanted by culture, society, trauma, or desire? If these programs are running, and if you are unaware of them, then you have become what Gurdjieff called an automaton. One day you are one person. The next day, someone else. One day you make a vow. The next day you break it. One personality contradicts another, and yet you call them all me. This fragmentation, this contradiction, is not a sign of inner complexity. It is a sign of inner chaos. And the root of this chaos is unawareness. To not be aware of the whole movement of your own mind is to live in perpetual contradiction. And that contradiction breeds conflict. And the very presence of that conflict is a signal you have not truly seen. You have not truly recognized. And let us be clear here. Even if you do recognize truth, suffering will still come. Challenges will still appear. This is not a fantasy of eternal peace. You are still a human being. You are still given a body, a biochemical casket. You will still have to face the chaos and complexity of life. But there is a profound difference. When suffering comes, how do you meet it? If you are an automaton, you react. You are triggered, and the chain of reaction unfolds automatically. But when there is insight, you no longer react, you observe. You watch the movement of suffering arise in you without blindly obeying it. You see how the external world pushes a button, and how that button stirs a wave inside you. And you see the wave without becoming the wave. The entire orientation changes. Now you are not merely surviving, you are seeing, and that seeing brings clarity, and in that clarity, freedom is born. You are no longer seduced by superstitions, because now you are no longer seeking refuge in any closed system. You are no longer a prisoner of any ism. You are radically open like an undifferentiated field, alive to the mystery, alive to the unknown, alive to what is without trying to fix it into a formula. This openness is not indecision. It is intelligence. It is the freshness of a mind that no longer clings to the past, a mind free of the superstitions of certainty. That is the mark of transformation, not that you no longer suffer, but that you do not suffer from the fear of suffering. So, if you really want to know if you've understood truth, ask yourself this: how do you revisit your suffering? Is it degenerating you, exhausting you, breaking you down into bitterness? Or is it deepening you, softening you, clarifying your sight? Because suffering handled unconsciously poisons the soul, but suffering seen clearly becomes fuel for transformation. Spirituality is not about improving your old self, it is about dissolving it. Because your old self, the identity you've built, the ego you've protected, the story you've repeated, has only brought you suffering. Had it brought clarity, you wouldn't be here searching. Had it brought peace, you wouldn't feel this restlessness. Had it brought wholeness, you wouldn't feel this subtle anxiety gnawing at your heart. This sense of incompleteness you carry, this inner roughness, this constant friction, this low hum of despair and discontent, is the evidence. It proves that something is either deeply wrong with the world around you or with the ego that is projecting that world. And here lies a deeper insight. These two, the world and the ego, are not separate. Our society, our systems, our institutions, our culture, they are all shaped by our egos, and in return, they shape our egos back. It is a loop, a feedback cycle. The ego creates the world, and the world reinforces the ego. So, the moment you feel incomplete inside, know this: the incompleteness is not just yours. It is mirrored in the world outside. And the world outside is echoing the fragmentation inside. Now the question arises: how do we break this cycle? Some people, usually those with simplistic minds or escapist fantasies, will say, just remove the world, renounce everything, run away. They think that if you delete the world, your suffering will vanish, but that's not how it works. The world is not separate from you. In fact, there is no division between you and the world. The very division is created by your thinking. You can leave society behind, but the society in your mind will follow you into the forest. The simplest and most striking way to dissolve this cycle is to destroy the very ego that sustains it. And when we say destroy, we do not mean to hate it. We do not mean to fight it with violence, repression, or emotional aggression. Perhaps the word destruction needs to be understood differently, more constructively. It means surrendering yourself to a purpose so vast, so luminous, that your petty, self-serving center can no longer survive in its presence. You fall in love with something greater than yourself, and in that love, the small self begins to crack, to melt, to dissolve. Now, the dissolution of ego is not a war. It is a love affair with the truth. And the only testament to this love is this. To what extent has it reduced your suffering? To what extent has it healed the wound of your incompleteness? And truth does not attack. It only shines. To destroy the ego is to see it clearly, to see its tricks, to see its fears, to see its childish needs, to see how it keeps pushing you toward illusion, toward noise, toward abyss. And when you really see it, not as a concept, not as theory, but as a living fact, you don't have to dissolve it. Your love affair with the truth will do its job. It will kindly start serving you rather than being your master, because the ego cannot survive in the fire of awareness. How do you know the poison is gone? You stop feeling sick. The reactions fade. The inner noise dims. The contradiction softens. How do you know a seed has done its job? You smell the flower. You feel its fragrance dancing in the air. This is not a knowing that happens when you read a book or memorize a formula. This is transmutation. It is a kind of knowing that does not belong to you, because when it happens, you that wanted to know is no longer there. That is why I love Lao Tzu when he says, "It is not the walls that make the room useful, but the emptiness inside." In the same way, it is not your knowledge, your labels, your identity that brings clarity. It is the emptiness behind them. It is the silence between words. It is the space behind the self. Even experience, no matter how mystical or profound, does not give you truth directly. Experience can be useful, but only if it breaks down your boundaries. If it helps dissolve the imaginary lines you've drawn around yourself. Because within those boundaries you've stored your beliefs. You've hoarded your concepts. You've said, "This is what I know, this is who I am." But once those boundaries dissolve, you realize what you called knowledge was just emotional residue, a small part of the bigger whole.